Hello everyone, it's Scott, and we're back for the top 10 Mythic Rares from Outlaws of Thunder Junction. We've seen the whole set at this point, a lot of interesting cards from the set. Hard to actually choose which ones are going to be the best for Standard, but these are the ones I think are going to have the most impact now and in the future. So let's get started with the top 10 Mythics from Outlaws of Thunder Junction. So the first is Bristle Bill Spine Sower. For 1 and a green mana, you get a legendary creature that's a plant druid. It's 2/2, and it has landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. And then for 3 and 2 green mana, you can double the number of +1/+1 counters on each creature you control. So I think Bristle Bill goes right into our Teamer control deck that is becoming more popular in Standard, because that deck is designed to get landfall triggers for Nissa. So we might as well add another card, Bristle Bill here, to now get +1/+1 counters every time we do that as well. And then we can grow something and give us really another way to win the game. Next, at number 9, we have Archangel of Tithe. For 1 and 3 white mana, you get an angel that has flying and is a 3/5. And as long as Archangel of Tithes is untapped, creatures cannot attack you or planeswalkers you control unless their controller pays 1 for each of those creatures. As long as Archangel of Tithes is attacking, creatures cannot block unless their controller pays 1 for each of those creatures. So this is, in my mind, a kind of a prison card from the set. And we've got a lot of similar cards to this one in Standard that really make the opponent have to pay to either attack or block. And I think because of that this is going to see play in Standard in a white prison deck, or maybe a Boros prison deck, because Boros also has would provide us red that has a lot of hate cards in it as well. So I think there is a deck there, and it's just going to have to see how long it takes for somebody to come up with a good version of it. Next, at number 8, we have the Githrock Ravenous Ride. For 3, a black and a green mana, you get a legendary creature that's a frog horror mount. It's a 6/5 with trample and haste. And whenever the Githrock Ravenous Ride deals combat damage to a player, you may sacrifice a creature that saddled it this turn. If you do, draw X cards, then put up to X land cards from your hand onto the battlefield tapped, where X is a sacrificed creature's power. So another one of the interesting Golgari cards we've got from the set. We've got a couple more coming up that we'll be talking about over the next day or two. But I think this is definitely playable in Golgari. It's not a 4-of, but probably a 2-of. And that ability to sacrifice something, draw some cards, play some additional lands is really going to help you ramp quickly. And the fact that it comes in and immediately has haste will allow you hopefully to get in at least one attack before your opponent can remove it. Next, at number 7, we have Geral the Flesh W and Geral the Hellraiser. So these cards, in my mind, really go together. We've gotten plenty of zombies already in Standard, and there's kind of a low-tier zombie deck out there. But I think these two together make that zombie deck something that is going to be playable in Standard. Now, is it going to be a tier 1 deck? Probably not, but together I think they bring it to a place where it is definitely playable in Standard. So let's talk about Geral first. He's a legendary creature that's a human warlock and a 2/3, and whenever you cast a spell during your turn other than your first spell that turn, create a 2/2 blue and black zombie rogue creature token, and whenever a zombie enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on it for each other zombie that entered the battlefield under your control this turn. So this is going to be something where we're going to see, Geral played maybe on turn 3 or 4, and then the next turn you're just casting spells to go ahead and take advantage of that ability to create those 2/2 zombies and build your board state. On the other side, we have Geral the Hellraiser. For 3 and 2 black mana, you get a legendary creature that's a human warlock and a 4/4 with War 2, pay 2 life. Skeleton zombies you control get +1/+1 and have menace. And Whenever you commit a crime, create 2 tapped 2/2 blue and black zombie rogue creature tokens. This ability triggers only once each turn. So I think the combination of these two, first of all, even if we get rid of the zombie cards from the Innistrad sets, I think they're definitely playable as a combination anyways, because you're going to commit crimes, you're going to cast multiple spells on a turn, and because of that, you're just going to be growing your board state with the number of zombies that you control. And unless your opponent has a way to clear the board, then it's going to be a point where you're just going to be able to overwhelm your opponent with the number of zombie creature tokens that you've got on the board. Next, coming in at number 6 is Kellen the Kid for a green, white, and blue mana. So Bant colors. You get a legendary creature that's a human fairy rogue. That's a 3/3 with flying and lifelink. And when you cast a spell from anywhere other than your hand, you may cast a permanent spell with equal or lesser mana value from your hand without paying its mana cost. If you don't, you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. So Kellen, I think, is going to be one of the big enabler cards from the set, because already we've seen from the set, our plot cards where you're going to play something early and plot it, and then you play it on a later turn. We have our spells from the Eldraine set that could go on adventure, and then you can play those. So I think Kellen has the ability to potentially be the focus of a deck in Standard. Because of that, I'm ranking him 6th. Next, at number 5, we have Gold Ven Hydra for X and a green mana. You get a Hydra that's a 0/0. It has Vigilance, Trample, and Haste. And Gold Ven Hydra enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it. When Gold Ven Hydra dies, create a number of tapped treasure tokens equal to its power. So we already have a number of ramp decks in Standard. So I think this goes in any of those decks, because not only does it have the ability to become a very large creature, but you immediately get to attack with it because it has haste, and then that vigilant ability means it can also then be a blocker, and you're going to get damage through with the trample. And this is another card that I could see going right into that Teamer control deck as a couple copies of that. So late in the game, you play this for 10, 15, and then all of a sudden your opponent is pretty much dead on board. Next, at number 4, we have Vaska the Silencer for 1, a black and a green mana. You legend creature that's a Gorgon Assassin. That's a 3/3 with Death Touch. And whenever a non-token creature an opponent controls dies, you may pay 1. If you do, return that card to the battlefield tapped under your control. It's a treasure artifact with sacrifices. Artifact, add 1 mana of any color, and it loses all other card types. So Vaska, in my mind, is a very interesting card, because what you're going to be able to do against graveyard decks is when something dies, you're going to be able to pay 1, and now it is a treasure token that you can control, and it doesn't go into your opponent's graveyards, so they can't replay it potentially or take advantage of it in some other way. So I really like that ability on Vaska, and anything that has Death Touch that's more than a 1/1 usually is a good card in Standard. So I think this is going to find a home in that Golgari deck that we already have out there, and this plus the other cards that we've seen so far, I think are going to make that deck a little bit stronger in Standard and may push it up to that tier 1, tier 2 status. Next, at number 3, we have Oko the Ringleader for 2, a blue and a green mana. You legendary Planeswalker Oko that has 3 loyalty, and at the beginning of combat on your turn, Oko the Ringleader becomes a copy of up to 1 target creature you control until end of turn, except he has hexproof. So basically you get to copy one of your creatures and make Oko a copy of that, and then you can attack with Oko if you want to. And for +1, you get to draw 2 cards. If you've committed a crime this turn, discard a card. Otherwise, discard 2. So basically it's telling you, hey, to draw 2 cards, you have to commit a crime. But even the other way around that you're having to discard 2, it's not that bad, especially in a deck that wants to put stuff in the graveyard. Now, for -1, you can create a 3/3 green elk creature token. So if you minus it, you get a creature token that'll help you protect Oko on the board. And then for -5, for each other non-land permanent you control, create a token that's a copy of that permanent. So if you can get Oko to be able to use its -5 ability, basically you're doubling the size of your board state, and that's a tremendous position to be in Standard if you can do that. So I like Oko. It's not as busted as the previous Oko, but there's certainly an opportunity to abuse this card. Next at number 2, we have Assimilation Egis. For 1, a white and a blue mana. You get an equipment, and when Assimilation Egis enters the battlefield, exile up to 1 target creature until Assimilation Egis leaves the battlefield. And whenever Assimilation Egis becomes attached to a creature, for as long as Assimilation Egis remains attached to it, that creature becomes a copy of a creature card exiled with Assimilation Egis. So I really like this card for control in particular because it's an artifact. There's a lot of enchantment removal right now in Standard, but we still have a limited amount of artifact removal. So play this in the mid to late game. You get to take their best creature, and then if you attach it to one of your own, you get to have your creature become that creature. And, you know, say you're getting rid of your opponent's Shealdred or Atraxa. You're now going to have one of those on your side, assuming you're able to equip it, and the equip cost is low at 2. And because of that, I think this is going to be a really powerful card in Standard. And at number 1, we have Jace Reawaken. For 2 blue mana, you legendary Planeswalker Jace that has 3 loyalty, and you cannot cast this spell during your first, second, or third turn of the game. +1, you get to draw a card, then discard a card. Typical ability to be able to rummage through your deck for things that you want. For another +1, you may exile a non-land card with mana value 3 or less from your hand. If you do, it becomes plotted. So again, that nice +1 ability, you get to plot something, play it on a later turn, and because you're using the ability of Jace, you're not having to pay for it. So that means it's going to be very mana efficient using Jace in this way. And then for -6 until end of turn, whenever you cast a spell, copy it, you may choose new targets for the copy. So if you can get Jace up to 6 and you can activate that ability, then you're really in a great place because you're going to have mana available because it can't come in on the first 3 turns. So you're going to have mana available at that point to go ahead and copy everything that you're doing. And for the most part, my feeling is that if you activate the -6 ability, that probably means you're going to win the game at that point, or you'll be pretty close to it. All right, so those are my top 10 mythic rares from the set. I think there are mythic rares that go beyond these that have playability in Standard, but these are the ones I think right now are going to be the most impactful now in the near future. Once we rotate out of the Innistrad, Kamigawa, and New Capenna sets, I think that's going to open up Standard to a lot more possibilities, and we'll see a lot more decks that have playability, because right now the cards from those 4 sets are really warping the format, and they are, you know, everywhere still. And hopefully we'll see more and more of these cards as we get past rotation. So thanks for staying to the end of the video. Remember to like and subscribe to get further content like this throughout the remainder of Outlaws of Thunder Junction season, and I'll see you next time.